certainly appreciate that position, as we pointed out in the past. We found a way with our plan to ensure that everyone living in poverty, for the first time in the state's history, everyone living in poverty will be covered by Medicaid under the state's plan. We'll reduce the number of people uninsured, and yet we'll still have fewer people on Medicaid, and we'll transition more people into the marketplace, which I think is good all the way around.
Congress is expected to vote on continuing resolution this week could defund Obamacare. There's an expectation that will pass the Senate. You made some comments over the weekend about trying to avert government shutdown. Do you support the continuing resolution as it is in principle, or do you think that's not something the Senate should vote on?
I think in the end, my statement over the weekend has been the last couple of weeks, is that I believe the government at the state and federal level is too big, and I'm trying to make it more narrow and focused so that it directly affects the things that people care about. So I think it's too big. I'd like to see it limited. But I also believe that the government that we have left after that, making it more efficient, should work. And I don't think shutting the government down is a good way to show you can make anything work. And so I certainly hope, no matter what form it takes, that our counterparts at the federal level don't shut the government down, because I don't think that's effective in moving our country and moving our states forward.
What in principle do you support the defunding?
Well, I think as I talk to employers around the state of Wisconsin, I hear overwhelmingly concern from them about the Affordable Care Act, that they feel that, in many cases, people have never talked to them politically about it, feel great concern about the uncertainty it creates, the question mark it creates for everything from small to mid-sized to larger employers out there. So I have some real hesitations about Obamacare. I've mentioned it when I was a candidate, both in 2010 and 2012. At a minimum, I'd like to find some way to postpone the effective date, because I think that would be, that just as we're starting to see nationally a slow recovery, I'd hate to see something, particularly beginning of next year, that would anyway dampen that recovery in the economy. And I think this has the potential to do that. I hope not, but just from what I hear from employers, has the potential to do that. So whether it's dealing with the funding or some way getting to a point where the federal government would be in a position to postpone, or some call it delay, I really feel it's just a matter of postponing. It's not necessarily stopping it, but postponing would be a big help for the economy.
Would that include the exchanges?
Well, in our case, in terms of our reforms here in the state, they're all conditional on the timing of the exchanges. So if the exchanges where you push back some of our reforms.
What would your advice be? Release the records with John Miller.
Up there, I don't understand that.
What would your advice be to either the House Republicans or Ted Cruz, who are fighting this tooth and nail? And it seems like if it's not a shutdown, they're going to have to really crow on this the way they've talked so far.
Well, they have a couple options. They could push it on a continuing resolution, which would have an impact potentially in the extreme on shutting the government down, which I think should be averted. But they also think there's a next step that comes up shortly, and that is dealing with the debt ceiling, the debt limit, and that's another place where they could make that case. And for all the hype in Washington, I think there are a number of United States senators, many of whom will be on the ballot next November in tough battleground states, who are hearing the same thing I'm hearing about concerns in their states about the economy and the impact of Obamacare, and who I think there could be a compelling case made for each of them that a delay or a way to reschedule or push back, postpone the effective date of the start of Obamacare from the beginning of 2014 would have an impact on them. A number of Democrats, I think, are hearing the same thing. It's why Max Baucus, one of the main reasons it appears is why Max Baucus, powerful committee chair, opted not to run again, because he was feeling that concern in his state. And I would assume that other senators in states like Arkansas, Louisiana, West Virginia, and other places across the country feel the same thing. I think for the good of the country, not necessarily politics, but the good of the country, as we see a slow but steady recovery nationally, we don't want to do anything that puts a wet blanket.
Do you think that there's any chance the president would back down on this, though?
Yeah, I do. I would not have 6 months ago, but when the individual mandate, or an individual or employer mandate, when that agreement was made to push that back, I think 6 months ago, none of us, Republican or Democrat governors, I think, would have been shocked if the administration was going to do that. I think after Senator Baucus made his statements about Obamacare being a train wreck and about his not running again, I think that opened the eyes of the administration that maybe they had a bigger political problem than they anticipated. People have said about Obamacare. There's an election held on this, but I don't think there could have been a candidate in a worse position to make it an issue than the candidate who oversaw a very similar program at the state level. So I think it's a lot of people hoping that politically realizing maybe there wasn't a referendum on Obamacare in the last election, and a lot of members of both political parties are very concerned about that.
Time for one more
Do
question.
you support Wisconsin IA's policy that prohibits using our footage in political ads?
I don't have a position on that one way or the other.
Governor, in the budget, you signed a request for lawmakers to hold public hearings on Common Core and a study on Common Core. Do you still support that? And where do you stand on Common Core?
I'd like to have a closer look at that. I think much as we looked at about 2 years ago, we put in place a group to create report cards that were an alternative to No Child Left Behind. I'd like to have Wisconsin have its own unique standards that I think can be higher than what's been established or what's been talked about at the national level. I think that's why consistently we've been at or near the top of testing, particularly when it comes to ACTs and others tests like that, and I'd like us to go forward. And so I'd like the legislature to hold those hearings. In a larger context, I'd like us to be in a position where we can identify our own unique standards that I think in many ways would be higher, more aggressive than the ones I'm talking about.
If the Obamacare deadline stays, and given the letters going out for veteran recipients having to enroll in this program, what assurance do you have to the public that they're going to get the coverage that they need in the meantime?
Well, in our case, unlike the letter that was filled with all sorts of inaccuracies yesterday that went out, we have been in our administration working with stakeholders all across the state of Wisconsin. We do have a plan in place for not only the letters that are going out, but for follow-up with everyone who receives a letter to help them in terms of finding out what the choices are and assist them. Again, we've got a whole group of people who are living above poverty. I think most people in this state and this country believe Medicaid is for people living in poverty. For the first time in our state's history, everyone living in poverty will be covered. We've got a significant number, a major number of people who will be coming on the system who are capped because of the previous governor's decision that now will get a chance to have coverage for the first time, even though they were living in poverty in the past. For those living above it, higher than poverty income levels, we're going to help not only with that letter, but then the follow-up is transition them into the marketplace, where either they get traditional insurance or in some cases, depending on their income, they'll be eligible. And if they're living just above poverty, many of those individuals, a single individual will be eligible for a premium with a subsidy as low as $19 a month. And we'll help people explain what options they have available, making sure that everyone will know. People choose not to, that's certainly up to them. But there won't be anyone in the state who won't know, not only based on that letter, but based on the follow-up calls and other assistance they're going to be getting both from the state and other organizations, what their options are.
How can you argue to defund or delay Obamacare when your plan relies so heavily on it?
Because if they did, we would come back with an alternative. We passed the budget, we point out that's the law of the land. And so we're fulfilling and operating under the law. If the law gets delayed, it's one of the provisions. These changes were to go back, say, 6 months to a year. Our reforms would automatically go back 6 months to a year. So it's consistent with that. And at the end, if it completely went away, we'd come back with an alternative plan.
Did you have an alternative prepared in this event?
Oh, we've got multiple options depending on what would happen. I don't think there's a black or white, as we're finding out right now, as to whether it's someone to defund, someone to delay, someone to postpone, someone to alter, someone to keep some provisions. I think there's probably a good 10 to 15 different possible options out there. We'd be prepared to handle any.
And to be clear, just when you said before you thought the president could back down, you were speaking about delaying it, right?
Yeah,
Not
yeah.
defunding it.
I don't think he goes completely away from it. But to me, I think realistically, and this is purely the pragmatic impact on the economy, not about philosophically. Philosophically, I don't think there's any question. I ran in 10, I ran in 12. I empowered the Attorney General to join the lawsuit. I've done just about everything possible to make my position clear that I don't think the federal nor the state government should tell me or any other family what they can or can't do with health care. But having said that, from a practical standpoint, I'd be happy if there was just a postponement, because my number one concern isn't ideological. My number one concern is economic. I'm concerned that there's too much uncertainty related to Obamacare, that it has a negative impact both on existing and would-be future employers, and anything that would in some way postpone that from going into effect, just as the national economy is slowly starting to improve, I think is important for us as a nation, and certainly is important for us here in Wisconsin. Thank you.
Thank you.